How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. It is an open line Friday, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be very happy to have you. I want to talk about, the poison crackers. That would be the salty saltines. That would be the crazy white people of America and the wild things they're doing. Immigrant store owners in Richmond, Virginia are begging the city council to turn back on street cameras. They were turned off after the George Floyd riots in solidarity and virtue signaling with the protesters. And now street crime and break-in of businesses downtown is up over 30% in downtown Richmond, Virginia. And the city council won't turn back on the cameras that were used as a crime deterrent because, they think it would make them look bad or some such. It's just nonsense. I want to pass along that information before diving into other stuff. And between the two, go to Justin calling from Tulsa, Oklahoma on the issue. Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I want to preface this with saying I come from a blended family. We have white, we have black, we have Mexican, we have different types of Hispanics. Our family reunions. But here's one thing that nobody in any of the family and wants at all. Nobody in any of our neighborhoods, we don't want crime. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if they're illegal. It doesn't matter what color they are. We don't want crime. To the lady in Chicago who let a rapist get away, you know what that rapist did? He went on to rape someone else. By not getting these individuals, no matter what race they are, out of society, all you're doing is systemically, you're just allowing them to perpetrate that on someone else. This is a morality issue.
No, Justin, what you don't understand is it is a morality issue, and it's the morality of white people who have caused these non-white people to act out against white society. We're the oppressor. We're the oppressor, Justin. We get what we deserve. Never mind that the crime is high in the black community. You know what it is, literally, and I'm not making this up, Justin. They actually believe that when black on black crime is those who are trying to act white dominating other members of the non-white community, and that's why it is the most cockamamie nonsense. And again, it is the poison crackers. It is the insane white people of America, the poison crackers, the saltiest of the saltines. They believe this stuff, which actually translates well into the next story I wanted to get to. So, at root, what is transgenderism? Now, I'm going to jump off the theological deep end real quick because you all know my worldview. But let me explain this with just 30 seconds of basic theology. Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, and so Satan's idea is to limit the numbers of the church. If the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, reduce the numbers of the church. You reduce the numbers of the church by reducing population. Go all the way back to Mesopotamia. The people would sacrifice their children to ensure the harvest. The Aztec were the most demonic when it came to these sorts of things. You know, contrary to the current white woke beliefs of the poison crackers, the Central American tribes sided with the Spanish against the Aztec. The Aztec were so brutal and so cruel that the non-Aztec communities in Central America sided with the Spanish to wipe out the Aztec. Because the Aztec not only sacrificed children, the Aztec would torture the child while killing the child, believing that the screams of the child could be heard by the gods, and the louder the screams, the better the rain. They were so brutal that the other Central American non-Aztec tribes sided with the Spanish to destroy the Aztec. The idea that the Western Hemisphere was peaceful until the white guys showed up to colonize it, actually, the Spanish were a good thing. Bringing Christianity to the Western Hemisphere civilized the Western Hemisphere. When you hear people talk about the stolen land that we live on, we conquered the land from Indian tribes that would steal from each other and murder each other and torture each other. It was the Western colonizers actually brought civilization and made society livable and workable. But along the way, in every one of these pagan societies, there was a common strain of population control. The Aztecs, the Romans, you name it. One of the hallmarks of non-Christian society is wiping out children. And in the Middle East, the current Ayatollah now, the new Ayatollah has erectile dysfunction, well documented. It went to Great Britain for treatment of erectile dysfunction. The children and the goats of Iran are safe from him. Child brides. You know, the Ayatollah Khomeini, not Khamenei, the original Ayatollah, when asked what would happen if a Muslim man took a child bride and in the act of raping her, ruined her, destroyed her body, the Ayatollah's advice was that you would be forced to take care of her for the rest of her life as punishment for what you did. These are savage people. That at root is transgenderism. It is a savagery foisted by progressives on children to stop them from being able to reproduce. Because at the end of the day, Satan wants to reduce the population of the church. If the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, let's reduce the size of the church. And the way to reduce the size of the church is population control. Child sacrifice in ancient times, and now, hey, let's make our kids trans and give them drugs to sterilize themselves. Well, transgenderism is disintegrating before our eyes. Fewer and fewer kids identify as trans. They believe it's nonsense, and it is. It's absolutely insane. And so what the left is moving on to rapidly is trying to tell young women, don't get married and don't have kids. The New York Times the other day did a big story on how it's actually a good thing for society that young women are not getting married and having kids. It's good for them and it's good for the environment. And the entire idea of encouraging people to get married and have kids is bad for society because it limits your freedom. Yeah, you know what? It limits your freedom to have kids. Philip, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. Philip wanted to go fishing today and take the day off, and his truck broke, and he wanted to go next week, but his wife's going to be out of town with one kid, and we'll have the baby at home with him, and can't get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and go chase the bass when you got a kid in the house. It does limit your freedom. It limited my wife's and my freedom when we were younger because we didn't have babysitters. My wife refused to have babysitters. You know, I was listening to John Deloney the other day, and he was talking about you got to be real careful when you let your child have sleepovers and stuff or go to a sleepover because the rise of abuse in households. Your kid is more likely to be abused at a childhood sleepover than anywhere else. It's just wild. The left wants to reduce the population. The The left has tried to advance transgenderism to get your kids sterilized. That's not working now. So they've moved on to convincing women that you can be in thruples. You don't have to be monogamous. You can destroy your life without getting married. You can have an abortion so that you don't have to have kids. There's a wild book out, Lindy West. Lindy West was convinced repeatedly to be in thruples, to be in three ways, to have these wild encounters. And let me just read you this. The day Ahmed and I got back together, Ahmed was the husband, in early 2012, we talked for hours. I cried for most of it. In broaching non-monogamy, Ahmed said that he wasn't seeing anyone else, and this wasn't about me. It was just a fundamental part of his ethos. He believed that monogamy was at its root a system of ownership. I had to admit that perhaps I didn't feel it as keenly as a white person. Ahmed loved me more than anyone else he had ever met in his life. I was the most spectacular person in the world and the first best friend he'd ever had, but this was not negotiable. He would not lie to me or anyone else about it, and he was prepared to break his own heart now rather than watch us decay and collapse later. I stood at this crossroads, spend the rest of my life without Ahmed, which was impossible, or agree to a polyamorous relationship, also impossible. Notice how he tried to explain to her that she was racist if she didn't let him sleep around. And this has been elevated, by the way, by the left. Women, you can have your cake and eat it too. You don't have to have children. You don't have to be married. You can have sex. You can have a job. You can make money. The Dinks dual income, no kids. It went viral. TikTok elevated the algorithm to highlight the people who were fabulously wealthy and had no kids. There is, in the root current of the poison crackers, of the crazy whites, don't have kids. Now, you can see where this all heads to. This generation of young people who are not getting married, or they are getting married, but they're refusing to have kids. They get pregnant, they abort the kid. They're going to get to a point where they need the rest of us to take care of them because they built no safety net for themselves. You know, God says, be fruitful and multiply. The left says, no, that's bad for the earth. What's wild is that it was in Genesis 1 where God's creating everything that he says, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. You, if you're a person of faith, have an obligation to have kids. And it's not just about perpetuating the species, which is a natural thing to do. It's also about building up a storehouse for you in the future of your kids are going to take care of you, not the state. The state doesn't want to take care of you. Look at Canada. In Canada, you can get same-day physician-assisted suicide, and it takes on average 28 weeks to get a doctor's appointment. On average in Canada, to get a doctor's appointment, it takes 28 weeks. But if you would rather kill yourself, they'll show up same day. The post-Christian world is suicidal. And they want you to commit suicide. And if you don't want to take immediately the suicidal option, what you can do is you can just not have kids, have fun, live your life, and then get to be 60 or 70 and wonder who's going to take care of me. Well, I guess somebody else's taxes are going to go up. The people who did it right and had kids, we need to raise their taxes because the government's going to have to take care of me because I'm lonely and childless and can't take care of myself anymore. The world is structuring itself in progressive society to convince young women don't have kids and to convince your kids to sterilize themselves, to wipe out our species, because they've decided the planet is better off without us. I gave a talk to my kids' school this morning, to the senior and junior class, and I said, guys, the world has given up on you. They think you're going to go to church and be right-wingers. So ladies, what society is trying to do is convince you not to go to church and enter into a relationship with these guys and don't get married and have kids, but to live your best life now. The world, the progressive world, is giving up on the young men. The young men are toxic. They're trying to convince the young women, you be toxic in reverse. Hate life, hate family, hate having kids, hate being married. It's all bad. You live your best life now. The New York Times in the last 3 weeks have done stories on how having kids is bad, getting married is bad, and being sexually adventurous in non-monogamous ways is actually a good thing. And what you read in those stories, in particular, like the story of this lady, Lindy West, her memoir, is that these are the most miserable people on earth. It's not a coincidence that the most miserable people on earth with the worst mental health outcomes are the progressive women of America who've decided that they can have their cake and eat it too, because you really can't. But you know what you can do? You can get married, have kids, and go to church. Those people tend to be the happiest people on the planet. I've been asked a couple of times about this piece of legislation that was killed in Congress that would have required the disclosure of sexual misconduct complaints. In fact, Elizabeth emailed me and says, why did the 357 members of the U.S. House, including many women, vote against releasing the congressional sexual misconduct and harassment reports, yet they were willing to release the Epstein files? The way the Epstein files were handled is one of the reasons. Most members of Congress actually would support the legislation, but the actual legislation about releasing reports of sexual misconduct and harassment was a terribly drafted piece of legislation. And it would require not just allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment be released, but all fake complaints and malicious complaints would be released without a designation that they were fake or malicious. Just if there was any complaint whatsoever, it would have to be released. And members of Congress, given what happened with the Epstein files and the destruction of some reputations of people who were completely innocent, they've kind of walked back and said, wait, we need to slow this down. This legislation's bad. And this is not a misrepresentation. This is a real concern, even among female members of the House of Representatives who want this documented and disclosed, that it would be very easy for you to call to the Ethics Committee of Congress, say Congressman X sexually assaulted you, and they would be required to release that information as that blank person says this congressman did this, and that would have to be released. They are considering now instead legislation that would say only the ones that have been actually verified will be released. But otherwise, you're just setting up weaponization of sexual harassment and misconduct and destroying a lot of good people's reputations by the release of false claims without an indicator that they were determined to be false. Now, I need to tell you about Incogni, I-N-C-O-G-N-I, I-N-C-O-G-N-I. Incogni.com/Eric is where you want to go, get 60% off. What is Incogni? Incogni is your protector for privacy online. In 35 American states, thankfully not mine, but in 35 American states, when you get your driver's license, the DMV will sell your information to online data brokers who then also buy your credit card purchases, your cable package, which monitors which channels you watch, layer it all over and build a consumer profile of you. And your information's for sale on these websites to advertisers, to hucksters, to fraudsters, you name it. Incogni goes and sends takedown notices on your behalf. And so it reduces your spam calls, your junk mail, data fraud, data privacy issues, identity theft issues. You go to incogni.com/Eric, I-N-C-O-G-N-I, incogni.com/Eric. Sign up today, 60% off. I use them, have used them. They genuinely work. Incogni.com/Eric. Occasionally you see things that you wish, dang it, I wish I had come up with this. There's a viral tweet going around about Tallarico, the Democratic nominee in Texas, that he is the living embodiment of the coexist bumper sticker. It's like, man, I wish I had thought of that. All right, we got to circle back to the war effort. There's a very fascinating piece on an Israeli website explaining what actually happened. And I'm genuinely impressed with what the Israelis and the Americans together have been able to pull off. And I just think it's notable the number of groups out there on the left and the right, the alt-right and the alt-left, the horseshoe theory, they've all meet in the middle with their hatred of Israel. I want to read for you this. The website is Israel Hayom, and let me begin. The first tool used in Operation Roaring Lion was a Hyundai i10 unwashed and scratched from parking. The Israeli deception operation before the strike included sending all the top IDF general staff officers home on Friday night for dinner. After all, the neighbors watched the parking lot to see whether the general's car is there. If it is, the attack must not be imminent. So the head of the planning directorate slipped away from the meal and made his way in his assistant's second-hand car back to the command bunker. That is, the general drove home in his car and then got into a beat-up Hyundai and drove back. It's already an open secret that Israel had planned a complementary operation against ballistic missiles around this coming June, marking a year since Operation Rising Lion. The new development was that the United States expressed interest in joining a campaign to bring down the regime. The Netanyahu-Trump meeting at Mar-a-Lago December 29th mainly focused on finalizing a joint strike in the summer. Netanyahu returned from there, gathered a handful of senior officers, and informed them. That day will be remembered in history. By chance, just hours before the meeting in Florida, protests began in Tehran. At first, they were too small for Netanyahu and Trump to take seriously. But a few days later, it was decided to seize the opportunity, increase the stakes, move the attack forward, and expand it significantly. The wheels of the dual war machine began turning quickly. In fact, too quickly. Trump was very eager to deliver a crushing blow to the Ayatollah regime. He therefore announced to the protesters that help was on the way. Israel had to restrain Trump and convince Trump, through the head of Mossad directly engaging Trump, that such a premature strike would cause more harm than good. They succeeded, but then a new problem emerged. The president of the United States began to worry that the mission might be too big for Israel. It required another flight by Netanyahu to dispel the concerns, followed by an urgent meeting with the IDF chief of staff, Eyal Zamir. He landed in freezing temperatures in Washington, D.C., carrying on his classified computer a 50-slide presentation, a war plan. In the United States, there's order. Instructions come from above. They're implemented without a high court, without the infamous left-wing NGO Beth Shalem. Still, it helped that the commander of CENTCOM, Admiral Brad Cooper, is one of the U.S. military's greatest experts on Israel. When Sinwar was eliminated, the head of Hamas, he opened a bottle of champagne to celebrate. Brad Cooper did. After last June's war, he launched his own inquiry to understand the Israeli operation, what the Americans could improve. What began as a theoretical study turned into operational preparation. The operation was originally meant to begin the previous Friday, but a combination of less than ideal weather and last-minute issues in the U.S. military caused a delay. They then decided to delay it further until Benjamin Netanyahu got word that all of the leadership of the Ayatollah would be meeting on a Saturday. So they did something. The Israelis, through back channels, communicated to the leader of Saudi Arabia, "We're thinking of doing this." And the leader of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, began through his public channels to publicly call on the United States to stand down. You got that? Publicly, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and others began to loudly and publicly insist that there needed to be time for negotiations. The Qataris were left out of the loop, and the Qataris believed that they could manage negotiations. Behind the scenes, Mohammed bin Salman was entrusted by the Israelis to make the case to Donald Trump. You need to take out the regime. Not only did the leader of the Saudis insist to Donald Trump that the time was right to wipe out the Iranian regime, but he also, Mohammed bin Salman did, gave the Israelis a list of targets and said, if I convince Trump to do this, you have to blow up these particular targets. And the Israelis willingly agreed. when I was a kid, you couldn't go from any Arab country in the Middle East to Israel. If you did, you wouldn't be allowed back in the country. I'll never forget going to the library one time and realizing that there were pages cut out of the encyclopedia. For those of you younger than me, there used to be books called an encyclopedia, and they had all the world's knowledge in them. The Encyclopedia Britannica was the biggest. The World Book was the most common. But you could look up pretty much any topic, and there was at least a half page on that topic, and sometimes more. And I noticed one day, doing a report, that there were pages cut out of the I section. Can't remember what I was doing it on. I think it was igloos, maybe. And realizing that Israel was cut out of the encyclopedia. Well, it was just the World Book. Let me go to the Encyclopedia Britannica. Yep, it was cut out of the Encyclopedia Britannica as well. And then realizing that the maps were redacted. They either had labels that said Palestine or Israel was blanked out of the map. You couldn't do it. You couldn't make a phone call from Dubai to Tel Aviv. The phone simply did not work. Now there are direct flights between Dubai and Tel Aviv. There's no censorship. The phones work. You can travel. There's trade. The Saudis have kept Israel publicly at arm's length because the Saudis for years have demonized the Israelis. But behind the scenes, there's been increasing cooperation, particularly as Iran has been more and more emboldened due to its weapons and terror regime to harass its Middle Eastern allies. So here comes the Saudis to publicly say, we think this attack is a bad idea, and to privately say, these people need to be wiped out. Saudi Arabia has had its oil fields attacked by the Houthi, who are funded by Iran. The United Arab Emirates expected that it would be hit the hardest and planned for it. 2/3 of the short-range Iranian missiles have been fired at the UAE. They've been fired that way because the UAE is close, and they have the most public ties to Israel. It's a big day when the Arab nations ally with their old enemy, Israel. Because the reality is that the Arab nations hate Iran more than Israel, and they always have. It's why you're seeing so many people who hate Israel try to blame the Jews on this. There's a piece out, the American Conservative, which is deeply hostile to Israel, very anti-Semitic, claiming that the Iraq war has ended the Trump coalition. How many of you who are supporters of Donald Trump have said, you know what, I can't support him anymore. He's blowing up Tehran. Very few people that I know of are opposed to what is happening. They don't want it to last forever. And the polling reflects that. The polling reflects that this is a war that people support. They understand it's necessary. It's not the war of choice. It's a war of last resort, but they don't want it to last long. And I think that's true. What's remarkable, though, is that, just think about this. Historically, Azerbaijan and Armenia, even when they were Soviet republics inside the Soviet Union, the Soviet police state had to be used to constrain them from fighting each other. And now that they are independent nations, they have regularly fought each other. They have disputes over territory. They've accused each other of ethnic cleansing of territory. And today, Armenia and Azerbaijan are allied against Iran with Israel. And Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain and Oman and the United Arab Emirates and Egypt and Syria and Jordan. Iran is isolated. And Iran's three big partners are North Korea, China, and Russia. They're getting technology and weapons from China that can't outperform the United States, and they're not getting old Chinese surplus weapons. They're getting bleeding edge weapons. those weapons don't work well. The Russians can't afford to send weapons to Iran. What they're sending is intelligence. The media is out disputing the White House, or the media is out disputing Carolyn Leavitt. Carolyn Leavitt says that even if the Russians are giving intelligence, it doesn't matter. And they're essentially trying to claim that the Russians giving intelligence doesn't matter. This is actually what Carolyn Leavitt said.
Why doesn't it matter if U.S. military is put in danger by Russia? And is that what the president believes as well?
What I meant, Kristen, and thank you for giving me a chance to make it very clear, is that it clearly is not making a difference with respect to the military operations in Iran, because we are completely decimating them. As I said earlier, we've taken out nearly 30 of their ships. Their Navy has been deemed combat ineffective. 90% reduction in ballistic missile retaliatory strikes against the United States and our Gulf Arab and partners in the region. So, of course, we are achieving the military objectives of this operation, and that is going to continue because the United States military is the best and most lethal fighting force in the world.
So they're mischaracterizing her statements, being dismissive of the Russian intelligence. And her point is my point, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The Iranians can't fire the missiles and drones at this point to stop us. We have air supremacy over Iran. The question now is what comes next as we head to a weekend. What comes next? Because you can't overthrow a regime if there are no boots on the ground. The president says no boots on the ground. So if there are no boots on the ground, what you've got to have is an internal presence. I have told you that they're arming the Kurds and have been for the last year. What they are also doing is arming other civilian factions inside Iran who know how to fight, who are willing to ally with the Kurds. Because something that most people haven't paid attention to is that behind the scenes for the past year, the Kurds, the MEK, which is a party in Iran that's actually pretty hated but has a big movement, the Shah, and other democracy groups have all been talking. And they've all laid out a massive plan of what can come next to bring democracy to Iran, or the closest semblance to democracy that they've had, with the Shah as a figurehead, much like a British monarch. And it appears to be working. But how do we now stimulate the ground operation in Iran? That I don't know the answer to. I assume there's an answer in the Trump administration. By the way, this is breaking. As I'm talking to you right now, Azerbaijan has just announced it has arrested Iranian Revolutionary Guard sleeper cells that were planning attacks in Azerbaijan against Israeli interests. That is hitting the wires right now. Azerbaijan, now they've even got now photos, Azerbaijan arresting Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps members who appeared to be attempting to sabotage an oil pipeline that supplies Israel with about 20% of its oil. The Azerbaijanis are now saying that they will engage in hostile action against Iran for what Iran is doing. They were at peace with Iran last week, willing to help Iran get its citizens out of Lebanon as the situation spiraled there. And now Azerbaijan is on a war footing against Iran because Iran is trying to blow up a pipeline to hurt the Israelis. The Iranians just keep playing this hand they've been dealt as badly as possible, and the Chinese and the Russians are making it worse for them. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425, except it's probably too late at this point for you to be on. So, look, I don't know what's going to happen this weekend. I don't know if anything is going to happen this weekend, but we will be 7 days into what's going on in Iran. And I know the Republicans don't want to say war because that raises constitutional questions about a declaration of war, but it's a military engagement in Iran but it is completely an air campaign, no boots on the ground. Now, I have heard one person point out that, we were able to get regime change in Japan with an air campaign. That's true, but nukes as well, which we're not going to do. So what do we do to further destabilize the regime? That I don't know. I do not know the answer to where we head with this. What I do know is that you are on the Sunday shows, God forbid you watch them, going to be inundated with progressive nightmare and fear scenarios on what's going on. This is Carolyn Levitt talking about the munition supplies.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you out here. It's a busy day here, as you all know. The president will be meeting with defense contractors here at the White House in a few minutes with Secretary Hegseth. This is a pre-scheduled meeting, and the purpose of it is to talk about the president's aggressive and fierce support for rapidly increasing the ability of U.S. manufacturers to produce American-made weapons, which we know are the best in the world. The president signed an executive order on this earlier this year. This is a long-held policy objective of this administration, and so he'll be speaking directly with these defense contractors. But of course, as the president has maintained, we have more than enough ammunitions, weapons, stockpiles to achieve the objectives of Operation Epic Fury and beyond. After that, you'll be hearing from
We can stop it there. I mean, you're hearing all of this regurgitated stuff to try to scare you to think that there's somehow this level of incompetence. Say what you will about Hegseth or Trump. Our military is highly competent, highly proficient. And I actually think Hegseth is doing a good job here. And the talking down is offensive to me. And yet it's blame America first crowd in charge of the media. Now, that's also affecting markets. It's also affecting precious metals, things like that. Swiss America is a trusted leader in precious metals. They have been for 40 years, and they've got the secret war on cash report they want to give you. If you call or text 800-289-2646, you can get a free copy of it. You subscribe to Swiss America Trading Podcast on YouTube as well for a lot of information. But if you go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, there's a Insights tab. You click it. You can get their blog with all their news and information. They do deep dive financial market explanations. They talk about precious metals, how the markets are fueling things, what the BRIC strategy is with China in charge of the BRIC nations. All you have to do is go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric. They give you a lot to think about, and you can get their free report, The Secret War on Cash, 800-289-2646 or SwissAmerica.com/Eric. Message and data rates may apply. You guys have a great weekend.